Welcome back to my Roblox scripting series. In this video, I'll show you how to use tables and arrays inside of Roblox Studio. So let's go ahead and begin. You can simply make a table by adding in two curly brackets. So let's go ahead and create a local variable, my table, and set it equal to a table we could create with two curly brackets. Our table is able to store values such as a numerical value like 10, comma, to add in a new value, a string value like hello world, and even a boolean value like true or false. This type of table is known as an array. An array is just a list of values. So if we were to print out my table and we play tested the game, opened up our table, we can see all the values in our array. We can also see their positional values to the left, which is known as their index. So the value of 10 is the first item in our array. That means it has an index of 1, and that just goes down the list. We can also use the index to search for specific values inside of our array. So if we wanted to search for hello world and only print out hello world, we would go over here to my table and right next to it, add in square brackets, and then inside of the square brackets, add in the index of hello world, which since it's the second value inside of our array, it should be an index of 2. And now if we play tested the game, as you can see, it only prints out hello world. This also works with all of the other values inside of our array using their dedicated index. We can also use the for loop to go through all the values inside of our array. So if we made a for loop, so for index, which is going to first be equal to 1, and since we have 3 values inside of our table, our max value should be 3. Inside of our for loop, we're going to print out my table, and in square brackets, we're going to print out the index. So remember how for loop works. The first index is going to be equal to 1. It's going to run through the for loop, print out my table with an index of 1, and then it's going to add 1 to the index until it gets to 3. So that's going to end up going through all the values inside of our table, and if we test out our game, as you can see, it prints out all the values inside of our array. Realistically, our table is going to have changing values, so if we were to add in another value into our table like 56, since we hard-coded it to only have a max value of 3 for our for loop, we're not going to be able to print out 56 in our table. But even if we change this max value, let's say it's B4, that's not going to take out the main issue. And that issue is if we add more values than 4, we're not going to be able to search for them. So we could fix this by putting in a number sign next to my table, which is going to get the number of values inside of our table, which should be 4. And now if we try to print it out, as you can see, it's going to work. Even if we added in more values to our table, such as true or another hello world, and now we try to test it out, as you can see, it's going to print out all the values because this right here gets the number of values inside of our table, which right now is 6. Roblox also has a built-in library of table functions that we can use. To access this library, we simply have to do table dot, and then we can find all of the functions. Some important functions you need to know are table.insert, which is going to allow us to add in a new value onto our table. We can use table.insert by adding in our table as the first argument, comma, whatever value we want to add in. So let's say we wanted to add 25 as our next value in our table. So let's go ahead and print out our table before we add the value, and then print out our table after we add the value. And now if we play test our game, we can see we have 2 tables here. Our first table is going to have our 3 values that we had at first, and then our second table, after the table.insert, we're going to have a new value, our 4th value, which is going to be 25, that we added onto our table using table.insert. We were able to add values with table.insert, but now with table.remove, we can remove values instead. So let's say we wanted to remove the value of 10. So to use table.remove to remove the value of 10, we first have to add in our table as the first argument, comma, the index of the value of that table we wanted to take out. So since 10 is the first value in our table, it has an index of 1. So now this should remove 10 from our table. So now if we play test our game, our first table, as you can see, we still have 10, but then in our second table, we don't have 10. Also notice how that brings down the index of all the other values inside of our table. The last function I want to go over is table.find. And what table.find is going to do is going to find the index of a specific value inside of our table. So let's say we wanted to find the index of false. To use table.find to find that index, we would add our table as the first argument and then add in the value of the index we want to find. So we add in false, and then if we print out table.find, it should go ahead and print out the index of false, which should be 3. And now if we play test our game, we can see it prints out 3 in the output. We can also go through all the values in our table using a for in pairs loop. So for I, which stands for index, comma b, which stands for value, in pairs, and now we just pass in our table, and in here we can print out the index and all the values. So if we play test our game, we can see all the values with their corresponding index in the output. If you had any experience with tables, you may have been told to always use ipairs when working with arrays. But what does this really do? So let me go ahead and change up this table a little bit so I can explain it better. Now, don't worry about the table looking like this. This is basically the same thing as putting the table in one straight line. It's just a lot more readable. And what I'm doing here is I'm manually changing the index of each of the values inside of our table. So the reason we use ipairs is that there's another type of table called a dictionary, which uses key values and makes them equal to a certain value, like 25. It's kind of like making a variable inside of a table. So what ipairs does is it completely ignores this key value and only prints out the normal values inside of our array. So now let me go ahead and make a pairs loop as well. So now if we test out our game, we can see ipairs does not print out the key value we added in, but pairs does. So that's the only difference between ipairs and pairs, is that ipairs won't print out this key value, but pairs will. Now it's time to apply what we learned by making a color changer. So the first step is to make a part with a click detector, which I've already done, as you can see right here. Then we have to make an array with many brick colors. So to do this, simply just make an array and then do brick color dot new, and then the brick color you want to add for each brick color inside of the array. Then when the part is clicked, using the click detector's event, run a while loop. Inside the while loop, add in a for in pairs loop to go through the table we just made with all the brick colors. Then change the brick color of the part using the colors inside of the table. Remember to add in a task.wait for, let's say, 0.5 seconds, so we can see the colors pop up and that you don't lag out from the while loop. When the part is clicked again, when it is already changing colors, stop the color changer. And then when it's clicked again, it should activate it again. So good luck, try your best, and then I'll show you how to do it. Alright, so here's how you make the color changer. So first, let's just get everything we're gonna need. So our local part is gonna equal workspace.parts, and then our local click detector, which should be inside of our part. So part.clickDetector. And now let's make our array. So local color table is gonna equal an array. And I've already saved all the colors. So your colors should look something like this, brick color new, and then the color you want to put in. We're also going to have a local active variable, which is going to first be equal to false, and you'll see why in a moment. So now let's actually make it work. When our part is clicked, we're going to use the click detector's event to run a function. So now in our function, we want a while loop to run when we click on the part, and when we click on it again, we want that while loop to start. And how we do this is we check if active is equal to true in the while loop. But how do we change active back to false if we change it to true? One way we could do this is by checking if active is equal to false, then changing active to be true. Else, if active was equal to true, we're going to change active to be equal to false. And now if we print active and test our game, we can see first active is equal to false. We click on it, it's going to be equal to true. We click on it again, it's going to be false. And that's going to keep interchanging. And that's how we're going to make it so our while loop starts and stops. Now, a simpler way to do this is to instead make active equal to not active. And what this is going to do is if active is false, it's going to give the opposite of false, which is true. And if active is true, it's going to give the opposite of true, which is false. Now we playtest the game. As we can see, we're getting the same effect as before. Alright, now let's make the while loop. So while active is equal to true, we're going to run this while loop. And in our while loop, we're going to make a for in pairs loop. So for I, comma, color in ipairs, because remember it's an array, we're going to pass in our color table. And now in our for in pairs loop, we're going to go ahead and change our parts brick color to be a new brick color, which should be color, as we're going through all of these brick colors inside of our color table. Now in here, let's add a task.wait so we can actually see the colors changing, and so we don't crash from the while loop. So now, if we playtest our game, and if we click on the part, as we can see, now it's changing colors, and if we click on it again, it should stop. Now there is a problem with the way we just did it, is that it will only stop after the for loop ends. So if we want to stop immediately when we click, we're going to add in another check over here, and we're going to check if active is equal to false. And if it's equal to false, then we're going to return end, which is going to stop the for loop and then break out of it. So now if we test our game, as we can see, we click on the part, it's going to start changing colors, and as soon as we click on it again, it's going to stop. If we click on it again, it's going to restart and change colors again. Great job if you're able to do this. This shows you can use arrays inside of your scripts. Those are the basics of using tables and arrays inside of Roblox Studio. If you have any questions, make sure you leave them down in the comments. Anyways, if you found this video useful, consider giving it a like and maybe subscribing. Have a good rest of your day, and goodbye.